everyone. This is Vanna McCreary. I'm hanging out with Yaya Diamond today, and we are discussing my book, Marilyn Manson and Me.
Hey guys, it's me, Yaya Diamond. What's up? I am so very excited today. I have a guest on the show, you guys, and this book is very, very interesting. It goes through all different kinds of things. And what the author doesn't know is that I was a child inside of a domestic violent home. So I kind of get what she's coming and where she's coming from. But this is the positive side, right? Because look at us, we're on the other side of this. And this is so amazing to see someone else that has gone through something and come out on the other side, maybe scathed a little bit. But we're living our lives. And I want to welcome this guest to the show today, the author of Marilyn Manson and Me. It is Vanna McCreary. And I hope I said that right.
It's actually Vanna McCreary, but that was
Vanna McCreary. Oh my gosh, I am done. I am done. But I tried. I
you did.
And it's such a pretty name. You can get it wrong. It's Vanna and Vanna. I'm sorry.
No,
But
that's all right. It's okay.
you're here with us today, and I want to thank you so much for being here. So, it takes a lot. It takes a lot to come out and say it. It took me years to actually say what I went through in my home, and I commend you, first of all, for that. But what was it? What triggered you to literally say, that's it? That's it. I'm coming. I got to write about this. Tell me about this.
Well, I don't know if you've ever had conversations with authors before where they've talked about just kind of like, it was almost like the information was channeled. They were just kind of overcome with the information and they just had to get it out. It was kind of one of those situations. I was sort of, when I began to write the book, I was a student I was a marriage and family therapy student. So I was learning about trauma-informed systemic therapy. And I had just gotten out of an extremely bad relationship and marriage. And I was processing a lot. And I think that me writing this book and me taking the classes that I did and getting my master's and that program helped a lot for processing, kind of everything that's happened. And not just so that I could heal, but just so, I mean, once you start to walk that walk, once you're on that path and you recognize that you're dealing with some pretty heavy adverse situations, like I think it can feel pretty isolating, but then I think it's important to recognize that so many other people, men and women both, experience that, and it shouldn't be as isolating as it is.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I agree with you. I felt like as if I was alone. I was going through this by myself, and there was no one in the world that went through what I went through, and that's not true.
It's not true, but I also don't think that people are necessarily equipped to have the conversation.
No, no. And sometimes not only are they not equipped, but sometimes the person that needs to have the conversation isn't ready to have it. So that too can be an issue. And I know that you are a therapist. Tell me about that, and how did this help you? What kind of a therapist are you?
Well, I'm a trauma-informed systemic therapist, but actually I had just graduated. So I'm kind of in that weird zone where I'm working to get my provisional license. So currently I'm off. I'm enjoying, life. Not being a grad student is magnificent, I must say. Uh, so I don't know. I mean, what was your question again? I'm sorry, I kind of got lost because I'm
So
not a therapist right now.
yeah, so why did you do this? Why did you go into the therapy, and so much so, and I want to make sure I say this, uh you did what is it, trauma informed systemic therapy? Why did you go through that? I mean, what was it?
Well, I think that it's because I think that the trauma that I'm referring to and that practitioners, when we talk about it on a psychological level, I I think it's just incredibly fascinating. And I think it's incredibly prevalent. And I don't think that people understand it and the effects that it can have on people's behavior. Like, if you recall recently, I mean, it's not that recently, but do you remember the Karen phenomenon?
Oh yeah.
It's like, oh God, it's Karen.
It's
What's Karen
Karen.
doing that? Karen this, Karen that. And it's just like, well, Karen's probably dealing with some significant
Yeah.
psychological issues. And, so I'm just, I think that it's pretty easy for all of us to be able to look at somebody and they're behaving kind of like in a defensive way, or maybe they're acting out or something like that. To me, when I see those things, I just see somebody's trauma twin trying to come out and defend the person.
Mhm.
So, and I think that that is a really good example of how most people don't know how to react to somebody who is just,
Hmm.
they don't feel like they've been heard. They don't feel like they're being appreciated.
Yeah.
They, disrespected, all of those things. So, I mean, it's so incredibly prevalent, not just in the United States, I think kind of worldwide. And part of that is recognizing that it's a thing and then trying to help people work through it, because it absolutely impacts literally everyone.
Yeah.
There's a thing, it's called vicarious trauma and emotional contagion. So if you've got one person who's, let's just talk about a family system, right?
Right.
That's highly symptomatic. Well, they are either the identified patient that really does have like a lot of problems that the whole family needs to maneuver around,
Mm-hmm.
or they become kind of like the problem because it helps sustain everybody else's flow and kind of keeps the attention off of them, and they become more symptomatic. It's something that they started to notice when marriage and family and therapy became kind of like a its own department, I guess, within
Yeah.
psychology.
Yeah.
And it's because a lot of people were working in psychiatric hospitals. They were working with schizophrenic patients. And then, they would do really great work in the hospital. They would improve massively. And then they would go home and they would immediately relapse.
Mm-hmm.
So then we started to recognize, hey, there's a huge link here between a person's well being and their social unit,
Hmm.
essentially.
Wow. Now I have a few questions here, and I want to make sure that I ask this. And if you want to go in a different direction, you just let me know. Or if you want to say something that I haven't asked you, or if this leads somewhere else, go right ahead. Because it's. I think that this is, like you said, a lot of people don't know how to ask the questions. They don't know how to get through this whole thing, and a lot of people aren't ready to. So I think that this show, it's going to be a really great show to help people to begin at least to understand that it's okay.
Well,
What
I
you
think
went through is
avoidance
cool, you know?
is a big part of it, though. Like,
Yeah.
people don't want to deal with heavy emotions. They don't want to deal with their own trauma. Like, something bad happens, probably the first thing I do is still figure out if I'm alive. Once I've gotten that taken care of, I'm processing it, and if I can't process it, I do everything that I can to forget about it.
Mm,
And
mm.
then
I'm the complete opposite.
oh, well, good for you. Like, I love that. But we're talking right now about basically the stress responses, which is
Right.
fight,
Exactly.
flight, freeze, and then there's fawning. So, and those are, and one can actually go, they don't just necessarily have a particular MO when it comes to that. They
Hmm.
will fluctuate between the different responses to
Hmm.
be able to facilitate their own survival,
That is
really.
awesome. See, you know more about this. You studied about this. This is something that I am in it. I am just not versed in this, but I understand that everybody responds differently. And like you said, some people just don't want to deal with it. So the question I have here is, how did you decide to intertwine your autobiography, societal commentary, and academic exploration in your book? And what challenges did you face when you were balancing these elements? Because I know that you went through some things, but then you have to kind of have that balance. And you said that you were suffering from PTSD.
Oh, I have
How
CPTSD. Yeah,
CP,
so
okay, so
which
how
is
did you do
complex
this then?
post-traumatic stress, and I
Right.
deal with severe dissociation.
So how did you? I mean, this to me, this is amazing because the book is out, it's there. How did you do that? How did you balance that and still put it out with the CPTSD?
Well, I told you, like, and however, like, I might sound like a moron or completely out there on my
No.
own planet, but it's just a lot of it was channeled. Yeah, it was my story. It is my story, but it's not just my story. I'm coming from a humanistic perspective. I explore lots of people's stories. I talk about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. I talk about
Mm-hmm.
Allison Botha, who was a woman. Well, she still is a woman. She's a wonderful woman, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never met her. She was a victim of really brutal rape and almost murder. They
Mm-hmm.
actually intended on murdering her. So
Oh
I
my God.
explore those stories in it because as a woman, like, and not even just as a woman, but as a human being, trying to understand what is, and I don't know what the rules are here, so I'm going to try to be careful with the terminology that I use, but who's forcefully put into a sexual situation.
I got
Um, like, because the different circumstances that can arise in somebody's life can be so incredibly varied.
you. Mm-hmm.
Like, there was a lot of stuff where it's like, yeah, I was there, I didn't want it to happen, it was pretty obvious that I wasn't into it, but I didn't voice no, right?
Mm.
So, like, I try to look at those situations and go, okay, well, was that or wasn't it? And I think that that's a huge societal conversation that's been going on for I don't know how many, well, if not decades, certainly like hundreds of years, where
Mm-hmm.
it's just, that line, that very, very delicate line of, are you just walking the walk of shame because you had a couple of drinks and you went to a party and things kind of got out of hand and now you're not happy with the decisions that you made?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it, no, something really horrible happened and it was completely against your will? I mean, there's a lot of gray area in there. And I think that really is still a very difficult conversation, and why we have the court of law and things like that. But still, there seems to be just a really big disconnect. And to lead it back to the PTSD and to the avoidance and the disassociation and the just not wanting to address a lot of this stuff. Those
Mm-hmm.
are all natural trauma responses. I
Yeah.
think it's another interesting question too. Like, for instance, let's talk about P. Diddy, and it might sound unrelated, but I don't think it's
No,
unrelated to
I don't
Marilyn
think
Manson's story at all, or
so. Right.
the Weinstein story, or whatever.
Right.
Because all of the same comments are still being said about all of these people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You should have known better. Everybody knows Diddy rides dirty. Like, you know what I mean? But nonetheless, we're having these conversations. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just like, and then we have the other conversations that come up like, oh, well, you should believe all victims and don't victim blame and don't do this and don't do that. And I'm just like, right. But let's also not forget, and I'm actually kind of thankful that it's happening now, that people who have accused people of some very vile, like, acts that are criminal, and then have been later found out to not been telling the truth about that, are
Yeah.
finally actually seeing retribution for their lies,
Yeah.
because those particular people unfortunately do other so many other people a
Yeah.
huge disservice. It's one of the reasons why, like, domestic violence wasn't taken seriously, you know, basically up until, well, I mean, I would say it was still a problem even in the 80s. Is it still not a problem now? I mean, it just keeps happening.
It does. It really does. And I agree with you. I agree with you. So let me ask you, I'm looking at the cover of the book and I'm seeing why the title. Tell me how did you come up with that?
Well, okay, so I used to hang out with Marilyn Manson for a while. And so all of these accusations started to come up against Marilyn Manson, and I've hung out with him,
Mm-hmm.
like, on more than one occasion. And I've seen him in different circumstances. And I wouldn't say that we were the tightest. I don't have his phone number today, but,
Mm-hmm.
like, I've spent enough time with him and I've had my own encounters that, like, I can listen to what's being said out there.
Yeah.
And even though, while I wasn't there and I wasn't involved, like, I have an inkling of who this person is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I wasn't there. That's
Right.
all I can say.
I gotcha. I gotcha. But you know that these accusations are accusations and could be false.
I would say there's some things about it that doesn't make sense to me.
Gotcha. because that's not in the personality of that person. You know, it's so weird how people do that. And I don't know why they do that. I don't know why they accuse people of stuff they've never done. But I know that greed is a big part of it, and also maybe some popularity. I have no idea.
Well,
I
and
just
you
don't
bring up
understand it.
something interesting. So I don't mean to cut you off there,
No,
but I
go
am
ahead.
kind of curious to explore this with you,
Hmm.
because it's just like if we, and again, I don't know what words I can use and not use. I should have asked before,
It's okay.
but I think we all know the RAPE word.
Yes.
So if you're going to say that those kinds of acts occurred, fine, but that's a criminal accusation. So
Right.
I don't understand how something that is really like on the heinous scale of acts that of violence that a human being can do, it's only second to murder, the
Mm.
RAPE,
Hmm.
right? So why I would see any of those cases in a civil courtroom is way beyond me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just
Especially
well the hell
civil.
out of my realm. It
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. Wow. Wow. So talking about your book and getting into the whole thing, what is it that you want people to come out of this with? And before you even answer that though, what was it that you came out after you've done this? Did it help you?
No, actually, I was throwing a temper tantrum
Oh, okay.
because
Well, tell me this. Oh my gosh, that is so different from everybody else. I mean, there is no one I've ever heard say that. Okay, now you have to tell me.
no, I was absolutely having a temper tantrum. I again, like I hung out with Manson back in the day. And like, even back in the day, I was always really, really upset because it was just like, I felt, and I'm sure he would probably, maybe, I don't know. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but like, I mean, he had a big target on his back, right? Like everybody's like,
He
they didn't
did.
like him because he's a Satanist. They don't like him because he's into rock and roll.
Yeah.
Like evidently, like you can put on a CD and then for one reason or another, you just want to blow up your high school. I'm like, really? That's magic. Like he's
Yeah.
magical, don't get me wrong, but that's pretty
Hmm.
magical, right? And I
Yeah.
just think he's always had like a big target on his back. And some of that is because that's a part of the persona, that's a part of his thing or whatever. But like I was attracted to Marilyn Manson because I also study the occult.
Mm.
And on an intellectual level, like I think he's a really magnificent person. He's always been a gentleman and very kind to me. And then, so I was really mad about that because, I was at the time, I was in high school as a teenager. And I don't like it when we say as a country that we have something like the freedom of religion. And then we like actively tear down other people who do not think the same ways that we do. Like,
Exactly.
and I'm like, it's fine. Like, if you want me to accept you, I'm more than happy to accept you. I just expect the same in return. There's a
Hmm.
way to respectfully disagree with somebody and still have like an intelligent debate without, let's tear each other's throat out, or that
Yeah.
person, they're wrong, or whatever
Hmm.
dramatic thing you want to throw in there. I don't know.
Gotcha. I gotcha. I gotcha. So, I mean, what kind of advice? I mean, you are getting ready to start your whole career. You're getting ready to do your thing. You got your degree. You're in the process of doing everything. You're kind of in the middle, and you're enjoying your middle. You're enjoying your moment. That's good because I love middle. I love being in that spot because you'll never be there again.
There's always an in between. Yeah,
There's
you're
always
right.
an in between. Definitely always an in between. But while you're in between, what is it that you're thinking, right now about your book that you probably never thought of before? I mean, you've had moments in time to really reflect back. What would be your favorite part of your book, and why did you write it, basically?
I mean, okay, so I make a lot of connections where other people don't. So, like, if you were to diagnose me with ADHD, I would be the ADHD that like sees connections in humor where other people are literally they don't even see where it lines up, right?
Hmm.
So I sprinkle a lot of that in the book because I talk a lot about things that have been in the headlines, things that are news. I do explore trauma on multiple levels. I explore like, what are the types of things that would make somebody behave those ways in the first place? So I talk a lot about Lonnie Athens' work. He wrote a book, and it was called Why They Kill, I believe.
Okay.
And so he talks about, like, the levels of brutalization that occurs that can turn somebody into just, like, well, you always hear examples, for instance, of like children that grow up under adverse circumstances with adverse childhood experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and then they grow up and then they turn into this big monster, right? And
Right.
it's just like, okay, why? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, let's explore those steps. Why does this happen? And I realized that they're not really any different than anybody who's been traumatized. So they're
Yeah.
probably going to show a lot of the same symptomology. And even with complex PTSD, because it's kind of like an umbrella, right? There's things that they have in common with each other.
Right.
Um, so that was a big part of it. I mean, I don't necessarily have a favorite part. I mean, because I wrote a book, I put myself into that book.
Yeah.
I mean, it's my whole personality. It's my story. It's me
That's wonderful.
interpreting the world around me. It's
Mm-hmm.
me having like a conversation with the reader directly about my own internal dialogue that is not just of my own. Like, I've heard other people have these conversations as well. So this can't just be my own internal struggle,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I do say some rather unflattering things. I admit to things that most people wouldn't admit about themselves, because most people like to make themselves look pretty good. Like,
Yeah.
they want other people to think well of them. I mean, like, I have no control over what you think at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't have enough time to read through everybody's bloody poker face either. So it's just like, let's get to it. Either you're on my team or you're not. We can respectfully agree or disagree, but we can't continue to have very important conversations and then not also be honest.
Right. Right. So if you could give any advice today to anyone who's gone through trauma, according to your book, what would that be? I mean, what would that advice look like?
I don't have advice, because my story is my story. I have a lot of things in common with other people. I
Mm-hmm.
share a lot of things in that regard, but we are all walking our own path. Like, I personally believe that, like, I was forged by that fire. Like, I don't want to say I'm the type of person that, like, I was like, oh, I'm absolutely defined by all of the trauma, and I'm always gonna be like held under that rock. And I'm like, I'll be damned. I will be damned.
Yeah. And you know what? I agree with you. And there's just like there's really nothing that you can, I mean, the book itself would probably help people to understand that they're not alone in their journey going through certain things. And like you said, you have, probably something in common with people to give advice. I ask that on every show. And most people do have advice. But how can you give advice to someone when you don't know exactly what they went through? And I think, you're going to be an amazing therapist. Is there anything that we left out today that you'd like to say?
Well, I wrote a really complex book, and there's no real good way of summarizing it. And it's a journey. It's For some people it's very triggering. For other people, like, they can just flip through it. It's kind of like a hodgepodge of academic discourse with um, sometimes very inappropriate humor, because I rely a lot on humor for healing, for experiential therapy, and just, you know I just, not everything, it can be the most devastating thing in the world, but there you can still find humor. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're being disrespectful or that you're taking away something from it. It's sometimes, things can also be funny. Like, I've definitely fallen on my face before, and it felt traumatic, but I also laughed at myself for it, because I think that's the human aspect of it that we all need to kind of embrace.
Yeah, I agree with you. Okay.
Okay. Well, no, I really just wish that I had written a more conventional book. I wrote it like an ENFP, because that's what I am. And so I not only do I explore the academic side of things and what that has to say about trauma and what I understand about the constructs of law and all of those complexities, but I also weave in a lot of humor. I also weave in evidence that kind of backs up my claims, not only from academic journals, but also a whole bunch of YouTube links. So, of course, the people who've done the work, they get the money. I have nothing to do with that. I'm just trying to share really good information. And because I do go through so many like heavy things, like I reference music, I reference all sorts of stuff, because all of those things are the things that I utilize to be able to help myself heal.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, so it's kind of a choose your own adventure. You don't have to click on the links throughout the book, but like I was doing that as I was writing the book. So you're going to be like, and if we could get in a time machine, you would be real time with me as I'm writing the book and like
That's
listening to
cool
all
though.
these links.
That's really cool. I haven't found anybody that's done that. So you're the first. That's cool. That's real cool.
It's been difficult to do. My vision was a little awkward.
That's okay. It's all right. We can't all be, straightforward. I know I'm not.
Well, I was self-published, so I knew I was going to be breaking rules, and there's a lot of people who definitely point that out when they read my book. So,
Oh well. Oh well. Oh
rule
well.
breaker over here.